What happens when your family betrays you and you're forced to reclaim everything you thought was yours? Grace Collins thought she had it all figured out. After losing her mother, she inherited her family bakery and the house that was a symbol of love and legacy. But returning home from college to find that everything had changed her father and stepmother, now claiming the house as theirs, shattered her world. Now, Grace faces a tough decision. Will she let the lies and betrayals define her? Or will she take control and rebuild everything from the ground up? Stay tuned to find out how Grace takes back what's rightfully hers. And don't forget to subscribe for more empowering stories. My name is Grace Collins, and I'm 25 years old. Recently, I graduated from the University of California with a degree in fine arts. Life as a fresh graduate has its challenges, but my story is more than just the usual struggles of adulthood. It's about legacy, betrayal, and the strength I had to find when everything seemed to fall apart. Growing up, my mother, Rose Collins, was the pillar of my world. A talented chef and business owner, she was more than just an incredible cook. She was a meticulous planner, someone who built her life with purpose. She made sure I always had a safety net, a sense of stability that would carry me through any storm. Even before her cancer diagnosis, she had secured our futures. One of her most cherished accomplishments was the family bakery, a business she built from scratch, pouring everything she had into its success. When she passed away 4 years ago, she left me the bakery, a piece of her that would never fade. "Grace, this bakery is more than just a business," she would say. "It's our home, our roots. You'll always have a place to call yours." Even in the final stages of her illness, her focus was on preparing me for life without her. She taught me everything I needed to know about the business, from managing staff to handling suppliers. Her foresight, her preparation, was her final act of love, and it's something I carry with me every day. But life wasn't always easy. My parents' marriage lasted a decade before everything fell apart. I was just a child when my father, Walter Collins, decided to leave us for someone else. There were no dramatic fights, no courtroom battles, just a quiet goodbye. He moved on quickly, marrying Brittany, a younger woman who seemed to slide effortlessly into the role of wife and mother. Their daughter Lily came soon after, and though I visited occasionally, I never quite fit into their new family. Brittany was always polite but distant, the kind of stepmother who made you feel like an outsider in your own home. "Grace, would you like to stay for dinner?" she would ask, her tone barely masking the hope that I'd decline. Meanwhile, Dad worked long hours, claiming he needed to provide for his family, except, it seemed, that didn't include me. Lily, my half-sister, was 10 years younger and the apple of their eye. I watched as Brittany fussed over her, braiding her hair, praising her every accomplishment, and it was hard not to feel like I didn't belong. Despite the distance, my relationship with my father remained cordial. He paid for my college education in a lump sum, perhaps out of guilt or obligation. It was his way of staying involved without truly being present. I accepted it without question, thinking it was the best I could expect from him. Little did I know that my mother's thoughtful plans, combined with my father's hidden motives, would soon set the stage for a storm I never saw coming. Losing my mother was the hardest thing I've ever faced. Rose Collins wasn't just my mom, she was my anchor, my cheerleader, the one person who made me feel like I could conquer the world. When she passed away from cancer 4 years ago, just weeks before I was supposed to leave for college, my entire world shattered. The grief was suffocating. It felt like a piece of me was ripped away, and for a long time, I couldn't even get out of bed. In those first few weeks, I was numb. I could barely process the fact that she was gone. That's when my father, Walter Collins, stepped in. In a way I hadn't expected, he, along with Brittany and Lily, temporarily moved into the house to support me. At the time, I was too overwhelmed by the loss to question it. I was just grateful for the presence of people, anyone, even if our relationships had always been strained. "We're here for you, Grace," my dad said, placing a comforting hand on my shoulder. Brittany nodded in agreement, her face carefully arranged to look sympathetic. Even Lily, my half-sister, seemed to go out of her way to be kind, though her curious eyes wandered through the house, taking in every corner like it was a museum. At first, their presence brought some relief. Brittany took charge of organizing meals and keeping the house running, while Dad helped with the overwhelming paperwork that comes with losing a loved one. Lily would sit with me, chatting about school and her friends, offering small distractions from the crushing weight of my grief. It felt strange, but in those moments, almost comforting. As summer drew to a close and my college start date approached, I faced a difficult decision: what to do with the house. Selling it was unthinkable. It was my mother's legacy, the place she'd worked so hard to secure for us. But leaving it empty for 4 years didn't seem like a smart option either. That's when Dad came to me with a proposal. "Grace," he said one morning over coffee, "why don't we stay here while you're at school? We'll cover all the bills, maintain the place, and you won't have to worry about a thing." Brittany, flipping pancakes at the stove, chimed in, "It would be good for everyone. Lily loves her school here, and the house will be in great hands." At the time, it seemed like a practical solution. I agreed, grateful for the offer, and left for college with a sense that my mother's house and her memory would be cared for. College was a whirlwind of classes, assignments, and late-night study sessions, but coming home during breaks always felt like stepping into a different world. My visits were a comforting reminder of home, and over time, I started to notice something unexpected. The family dynamic at my mother's house was changing. When I came home for my first break, Brittany greeted me with a warm smile and a home-cooked meal. "Welcome back, Grace. I made lasagna, your favorite," she said, setting the table as if she'd always known my preferences. Lily, my half-sister, couldn't wait to drag me to her room to show off her latest artwork. "Look, Grace, do you think I should add more blue here?" she'd ask, her enthusiasm infectious. For the first time, she treated me like a sister rather than the distant relative who occasionally visited. As the years passed, these visits became more than just a chance to recharge. They started to feel like I was part of something bigger. During Christmas breaks, we'd decorate the tree together, arguing playfully over ornaments. "Tinsel is so tacky," Brittany would declare, while I'd laugh and insist it was classic. Dad would lift Lily to place the star on top, grinning as if this was the family he'd always envisioned. Those moments felt warm and genuine, almost like we were truly a family. Summer breaks were longer, slower, and more relaxed than I ever remembered. Lily and I spent lazy afternoons at the community pool, the sun warming our skin as we floated in the water. Or we binge-watched movies while munching on popcorn. Brittany surprised me by inviting me to her book club, and we bonded over dissecting romance novels, laughing at the absurd plot twists. "Grace's insights are spot on," Brittany said one evening, her voice filled with sincerity. It was a small compliment, but it made me feel included in a way I hadn't expected. Even Dad, always reserved, seemed to soften. He would join us for dinner, ask about my classes, and seem genuinely interested in my life. "Your mom would be so proud of you," he said one evening, his voice thick with emotion. It was in moments like those that I realized I wasn't just a guest anymore, I was part of the family. As time passed, I began to see Brittany and Lily in a new light. Brittany, who had once felt cold and distant, now took on a maternal role. She always asked about my day, my goals, making sure I felt like I belonged. Lily, with her youthful energy and non-stop chatter, filled the house with life, and her habit of seeking my advice made me feel like an older sister for the first time. The house itself had changed too. Subtle touches of Brittany's influence appeared: new curtains, a carefully arranged centerpiece on the dining table, but they were tasteful, blending with the warmth my mother had always nurtured. It felt as though we were building something together, something that honored the past but embraced the present. By the time I graduated, I genuinely believed we had created a strange but functional family dynamic. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. I never imagined how fragile it all was, how quickly the foundation we built could crack under the weight of hidden truths. Graduating from college felt like the beginning of something new, a fresh chapter. 4 years of late nights, hard work, and dreams about my future had finally paid off. With my degree in hand, I had secured a job at a local firm back in my hometown, and the thought of returning to the house I had grown up in filled me with comfort and excitement. My mother's house, my house, was waiting for me, a place where I could settle down and begin to build my career. The June afternoon I arrived back home was bright and warm, the kind of day that fills you with optimism. As the taxi pulled up to the driveway, I smiled at the familiar sight of the house. The garden was well maintained, though the roses my mom had once lovingly tended seemed slightly different. The house felt the same, yet there were subtle changes. Brittany had made her mark over the years, new curtains, a fresh coat of paint on the shutters. Everything looked welcoming, and I couldn't wait to step inside and claim my room once again. Dragging my suitcases up the front walk, I reached for my keys, eager to enter the home that had always been a safe haven. But when I slid the key into the lock, it wouldn't turn. I frowned, tried again, jiggling the key slightly. Still nothing. Confused, I muttered under my breath, "What the hell?" and knocked loudly on the door. Surely it was just a mistake, maybe a new lock had been installed, and no one thought to give me a spare. A moment later, the door opened. Brittany stood there, her expression shifting from surprise to discomfort in an instant. She was wearing an apron dusted with flour, as if she'd been baking. "Grace," she said, her voice hesitant. "What are you doing here?" I wheeled my suitcase into the entryway, ignoring the awkwardness in her tone. "What do you mean?" "I live here," I replied, my eyes scanning the living room, which looked subtly different from how I'd left it. New furniture arrangements, a different rug, nothing too drastic, but everything felt off. "Why were the locks changed?" Before Brittany could answer, Dad appeared from the living room, his face pale and movements stiff. Lily trailed behind him, looking nervous but staying silent. "Grace," Dad began, rubbing the back of his neck, a telltale sign he was uncomfortable. "Let's talk in the office for a minute." Alarm bells started ringing in my head as I followed him to the small office that used to belong to my mom. The walls were still lined with her books and certificates, but the air felt heavy, as if the room itself knew what was coming. Dad closed the door behind us and turned to face me, his hands shaking slightly. "Grace," he started, his voice low. "There's something I need to tell you." He paused, and I could see the weight of his words pressing down on him. Brittany thinks this house belongs to me." I stared at him, uncomprehending. "What are you talking about? Mom left this house to me. It's in her will." He nodded, avoiding my eyes. "I know that, but when we moved in, I told Brittany it was mine, that I'd given it to your mom out of kindness after the divorce, and that when she passed, it came back to me." The betrayal hit me like a punch to the gut. "You lied to her for 4 years? You let her believe this was your house, and now you're telling me that she doesn't even know it's mine?" Dad's shoulders slumped. "I didn't think it would matter. You were at college, and we needed a place to stay. I thought it would be temporary." Anger and disbelief surged through me. "Temporary? This is my house, Dad, Mom's house, and you're telling me you've been living here, letting Brittany act like it's hers, while you lied to her and to me?" "I was going to tell her the truth," he said weakly, but his words rang hollow. "Just give me some time to figure out how to handle this." I shook my head, furious. "You've already had 4 years, Dad." At that moment, Brittany knocked on the door, her voice sharp. "Is everything okay in there?" The tension was suffocating, but one thing was clear. I wasn't going to let them continue this charade. The first few days back in the house were awkward, but I tried to convince myself that things would get better. After the confrontation with my father, I chose to keep quiet for the time being, hoping he would resolve the situation as promised. But the atmosphere in the house shifted almost immediately, and Brittany's behavior quickly took a turn for the worse. It started with small things, comments that sounded polite on the surface but were laced with subtle jabs. "Grace, I reorganized the pantry for efficiency. You probably didn't notice since you've been so busy with college," she'd say, smiling too sweetly. Then there were the accidents. One morning, I found my favorite blouse in the laundry ruined with bright pink streaks. "Oh dear," Brittany exclaimed when I confronted her, her tone dripping with mock concern. "I must have mixed up the laundry baskets. These things happen when a house gets too crowded." Lily, who had once been eager to spend time with me, now seemed distant and aloof. She rolled her eyes whenever I entered the room and started referring to me as "that girl" during her loud phone conversations with friends. "Mom says it's weird you're still here," I overheard her whispering one evening. The word stung more than I expected. Brittany's passive-aggressive jabs soon turned into outright hostility. One evening, as I poured myself a cup of coffee, she cornered me in the kitchen, arms crossed and her expression icy. "Grace, have you thought about getting your own place?" she asked, her tone casual but her words pointed. "You're starting a new job soon. It's time to think about living independently. You're a grown woman after all." I clenched the mug in my hands, forcing myself to stay calm. "Actually, I've talked to Dad about staying here for a while. He's fine with it." Her lips pressed into a thin line, and for a moment I thought she might argue. Instead, she turned and left the kitchen without another word, but her actions spoke louder than anything she could have said. The next morning, I woke up to find the living room rearranged, my mother's favorite vase shoved into a dusty corner shelf. "It didn't match the new aesthetic," Brittany said when I confronted her, her tone too casual, like it was nothing. My frustration simmered beneath the surface, but I bit my tongue, knowing that any argument would only make things worse. The tension in the house was suffocating. Brittany had made it clear I wasn't welcome, and Lily followed her lead, treating me with open disdain. Even Dad, who had always been my safety net, seemed distant. He avoided my gaze, his face drawn with tension. He left early each morning, claiming work obligations, but I could tell he was avoiding me. I was becoming a stranger in my own home. Family dinners, once a comforting routine, turned into a battlefield. Subtle digs, uncomfortable silences. Brittany would cook just enough food for 3 people, then feign surprise when I joined them at the table. "Oh, I didn't think you'd be here for dinner," she would say, her tone light, but her eyes cold as ice. Lily giggled at her mother's remarks, and Dad would sit quietly as though he were invisible, avoiding confrontation at all costs. As the days passed, the isolation wore on me. I retreated to my room more often, trying to avoid the hostility that seemed to follow me around the house. But even there, I couldn't escape the suffocating sense of betrayal. This wasn't just about Brittany anymore. It was about my father, the man who had always stood by, silently complicit as his wife chipped away at my sense of belonging. I tried to focus on my new job, reconnecting with old friends, anything to distract myself, but the weight of the tension in the house was inescapable. Each day, the cracks in our fragile family dynamic grew deeper, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being pushed out of my own life. Saturday morning arrived unusually quiet. No sounds of Brittany's weekend baking in the kitchen, no music blaring from Lily's room, no faint murmur of the TV where Dad usually watched sports. The silence was unsettling, like the house itself was holding its breath. I slipped out of bed and padded downstairs, calling out softly, "Hello? Brittany? Dad?" But there was no response. The kitchen was spotless, unused since the night before. The living room was untouched, throw pillows arranged perfectly on the couch. Even the usual clutter by the entryway, Lily's shoes, Brittany's handbag, was gone. A quick glance outside confirmed it. Dad's car wasn't in the driveway. Confused, I checked my phone, expecting a text or note explaining their absence. But there was nothing. I dialed Dad's number, but it went straight to voicemail. Frowning, I tried again a few more times before reluctantly calling Brittany. She picked up on the 4th ring, her voice sharp and impatient. "What do you want, Grace?" she snapped, the sound of waves and tropical music faint in the background. "I just wanted to know where everyone is," I said, caught off guard by her tone. "I woke up and the house was empty." She laughed, but it wasn't the warm laugh I had grown used to. It was cruel, cutting. "Oh, didn't we tell you? We're in the Maldives. First-class flights, luxury resort, the works." Her voice dripped with mockery. "We didn't mention it because, frankly, we didn't want you tagging along and expecting us to pay for you." "What?" I stammered, my disbelief mixing with anger. "Brittany, what are you talking about? You left without saying anything." "Save it," she cut me off coldly. "I'm done with this whole situation. You're nothing but a freeloader living in our house, mooching off us like you own the place. Your father might tolerate it, but I won't. Do you know how embarrassing it is to have a grown woman squatting in her own home?" Her words struck like a slap, but she wasn't finished. "When we get back, I want you gone. Pack your things and leave, Grace, and don't think you can guilt your father into letting you stay. He agrees with me. He's just too spineless to tell you himself. We've already blocked your number. Have a nice life." The line went dead before I could respond. For a long moment, I just stood there, the phone trembling in my hand. Her venomous words echoed in my mind, and the weight of the betrayal hit me like a tidal wave. I had been pushed out, discarded, rejected by the people I had always considered my family. And now, not only had they stolen my place in their lives, but they were also making it clear they didn't even care. But then, something inside me shifted. The sadness and disbelief gave way to anger, white-hot, focused anger. This was my house, my mother's house, and I was done playing nice. I spent the rest of the day packing their belongings with a determination I didn't know I had. Brittany's expensive clothes, Lily's school supplies, Dad's golf clubs, it all went into boxes and suitcases. I stacked them neatly in the garage, making sure not a single trace of them remained in the house. Every move felt cathartic, like I was reclaiming a piece of myself with each item I packed away. By evening, I had called a locksmith. "Can you change the locks immediately?" I asked, my voice firm. He arrived within the hour, replacing every lock in the house while I stood by, clutching the new keys like a lifeline. It cost a small fortune, but I didn't care. As I closed the door behind him, I felt a strange sense of relief. This was my house again, and no one was going to take it from me. Friday evening, I pulled into the driveway after a long day at work and immediately spotted their car. They were back. Brittany, Dad, and Lily stood near the front steps, surrounded by their suitcases and boxes from the garage. Brittany's face was flushed with fury, her hands gesturing wildly as she spoke to Dad. Lily hung back, scowling, while Dad wore his usual look of quiet discomfort. As soon as I stepped out of my car, Brittany's voice erupted. "How dare you change the locks?" she shouted, storming toward me. "This is our house! You have no right to lock us out!" I ignored her ranting, walking calmly past them toward the front door. Brittany followed close behind, her voice rising with every step. "This is breaking and entering. We're calling the police. You think you can just throw us out like we're nothing?" I stopped at the door, turned, and faced her. Something inside me felt calm, steady, even as her words spat like venom. "No, Brittany," I said firmly. "This isn't your house. It never was. This house belongs to me. My mother left it to me in her will. The only reason you've been living here is because I allowed it, and now I'm done." Her face twisted in disbelief. She turned to Dad, who stood frozen near the car. "Walter, tell her she's lying. Tell her this is our house," she demanded, her voice shrill. Dad looked like he wanted to melt into the pavement. He avoided my gaze as he shuffled uncomfortably, finally mumbling, "She's telling the truth." Brittany's fury boiled over. "You lied to me!" she shrieked, glaring at him. "You let me think this was your house, that you were doing us a favor by letting her stay. What else haven't you told me?" Her attention snapped back to me, her expression a mix of anger and desperation. "Grace, sweetheart," she began, her tone suddenly soft and saccharine. "We've had so many good times here, holiday dinners, book club nights. This is a family home. Surely we can work something out." "No," I said, cutting her off. "We can't. Your things are in the garage. Take them and leave." Brittany's mask cracked, her tone turning venomous again. "You ungrateful little... After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? You'd throw your own family out on the streets?" "You've never treated me like family," I shot back, my voice calm but firm. "And don't pretend this is about loyalty. You tried to steal my house, Brittany, my mother's house." Dad stepped forward, his voice trembling with desperation. "Grace, please. I know I've made mistakes, but we're family. We can figure this out. Just let us stay a little longer." I shook my head, locking eyes with him, my resolve hardening. "No, Dad. You lied to her. You lied to me. You let her erase every trace of Mom from this house while you stood by and said nothing. I won't let you keep doing this." Brittany tried one last time, her voice rising with a mix of anger and desperation. "You can't do this! We'll fight you on this, Grace!" I opened the door and stepped inside, turning to face them one last time. "You're welcome to try," I said, my voice calm, final. I closed the door firmly behind me. Through the window, I watched them argue as they packed the last of their things into the car. Brittany screamed, Lily cried, and Dad just stood there, defeated. As the car pulled away, something heavy lifted from my chest. The house was finally mine again. Truly mine. In the days that followed, the house felt oddly quiet, but the silence brought an unexpected peace. For the first time in years, I wasn't walking on eggshells, bracing for Brittany's passive-aggressive comments. The space was mine again, and with it, a clarity I hadn't felt in so long. This wasn't just my mother's house anymore. It was my sanctuary, my fresh start. Cutting ties with my father and his family wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Dad tried reaching out, calling from new numbers and leaving voicemail after voicemail full of apologies and promises to fix things. I didn't answer. His words felt hollow, empty after everything he'd let happen. "I love you, Grace," he said in one message. "I was just trying to keep the peace." But peace built on lies isn't peace at all, and I wasn't willing to compromise my dignity for his comfort anymore. Brittany didn't even bother trying to contact me. She had made her feelings crystal clear. Lily's silence, though, stung more than I expected. But I reminded myself that she was still young, caught in the middle of decisions she had no control over. Even so, I knew it was better to let go of the toxic ties that had held me back for so long. With them gone, I turned my focus to rebuilding my life. The first step was reclaiming the house not just physically, but emotionally. I rearranged the furniture back to the way my mom had it, repainting the walls in soft, warm tones that reminded me of her. I replanted the rose bushes in the garden, choosing the same color she had loved. Each small change felt like a step toward honoring her memory, while making the space my own. Work became my anchor. My job at Marshall and Brooks Financial was challenging but fulfilling, and I threw myself into it wholeheartedly. My colleagues became friends, and for the first time, I felt like I was part of a community. Hazel, from the risk assessment team, became my confidant. Our lunch breaks were filled with laughter, planning, and talk of the future. But the most meaningful project I embarked on was restoring my mother's bakery, which had been closed since her passing. It took months of planning, late nights, and a lot of sweat, but eventually, the doors reopened. The first time I stepped behind the counter, the scent of fresh bread and pastries filled the air. I felt a surge of pride and connection to her. The bakery wasn't just a business, it was her legacy, and now it was mine to carry forward. In the quiet moments, I often thought about everything that had happened, the betrayal, the heartbreak, the loss of the people I had once called family. But I didn't dwell on it with bitterness. Instead, I saw it as a chapter in my story, one that taught me the importance of boundaries, self-respect, and the power of starting over. Healing isn't linear, and it isn't easy, but standing in my mother's house, surrounded by the life I was rebuilding, I felt something I hadn't in years: hope. My mother had always believed in planning for the future, and now I understood why. She had given me the tools to stand on my own, even when the people I trusted most let me down. As I looked out at the garden, the roses blooming in the evening light, I knew I was ready to move forward. This house, this life, it was mine, and I would build it into something beautiful, for her, for me, and for the future she always wanted me to have. What do you do when the people you once called family betray you so deeply that even the home you grew up in becomes a battleground? When your father, the one person who should have protected you, chooses silence and lies over standing by you? Grace thought she had found peace after her mother's death, believing that her father and Brittany's family were finally starting to accept her. For years, they made it seem like a happy, functioning family, but the moment she returned home after graduation, everything shattered. She learned that the house she thought was hers, her mother's legacy, had been lied about, claimed by her father as his, and let Brittany assume it was hers. But Grace, with all her pain and betrayal, made a decision. She took back what was hers, not just the house, but her sense of self. She reclaimed the home her mother had worked so hard for, and with it, she reclaimed her life. No more lies, no more manipulation. And when Brittany tried to fight back, it was too late. The damage was done and Grace was done. Now, Grace is moving forward, starting fresh, focusing on her career and restoring her mother's bakery. She's healing not just from the loss of her family, but from the realization that family isn't always about blood. It's about respect, honesty, and the boundaries we set to protect ourselves. So here's the question. If you were in Grace's shoes, would you have walked away sooner, or would you have kept fighting for the family you once knew? Let's talk about it in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more.
I nearly spilled my wine when I saw him across the crowded gallery. Jace, my high school sweetheart who had disappeared without a trace 15 years ago. Our eyes locked and memories came flooding back. The dizzy excitement of young love, late nights full of laughter, promises of forever. Then the gut-wrenching confusion when he vanished unexpectedly. I watched Jace weave through the crowd toward me, still trim and handsome as ever, though time had etched faint lines at the corners of those piercing green eyes. "Marla," he said, "I can't believe it's you." His voice sent shivers down my spine. "You look incredible." I murmured awkward pleasantries, stunned by this ghost from my past. What was Jace doing back in Colorado Springs after all this time? I noticed no wedding ring on his finger and couldn't help but wonder if he was still the charming heartbreaker who had left me pining all those years ago. "What brings you here?" I managed. "My job. I'm a web designer now, freelance. Just got hired for a project here in town." He seemed nervous. I studied his face, searching for a clue to whether he had thought of me at all during our 15 years apart. Jace suggested grabbing dinner to catch up. I hesitated at first, but curiosity got the better of me. Over candlelit pasta, wine flowing freely, the conversation turned intensely personal. Jace revealed he had burned out on big city life in Chicago, tired of the rat race and shallow connections. Now here he was, hoping for a fresh start someplace more peaceful. "Maybe this chance meeting is the universe telling me I need to set down roots," he said earnestly. "Reconnect with what really matters." When his hand found mine across the table, my pulse quickened. I thought of my small but comfortable house, my position as project manager in my family's firm, the quiet predictability of my life. Jace's return felt like a spark of electricity jolting me out of complacency. By the end of the evening, we had exchanged numbers with a promise to meet again soon. I barely slept that night, my mind spinning. When Jace called the very next day, I said yes immediately to another date, and another after that. His affectionate attention was intoxicating, exactly what I thought I had left behind in my teen years. He whispered sweet nothings in my ear and showered me with compliments. I felt desired, cherished. Before I knew it, we were officially a couple, seeing each other multiple times a week. My friends were skeptical when they heard Jace was back on the scene. "Isn't he the one who disappeared without explanation?" Cleo said pointedly. "Be careful, Marla." But I brushed off their warnings. When you find a connection like this, you have to see it through, I thought. What if Jace is my second chance at true love? Barely 3 months had passed, yet Jace dropped to one knee and presented me with a diamond ring. "Marla, you are the love of my life," he declared passionately. "I want to spend every day with you. Will you marry me?" My pulse roared in my ears. This was happening so fast, but when you know, right? I gazed at Jace's handsome face and eager eyes. He had lit a fire in my once predictable life. Maybe this whirlwind romance was exactly what I needed. "Yes!" I cried. "Yes, Jace, I'll marry you." He swept me up ecstatically in his arms. I clung to him, dizzied by emotions I hadn't felt since high school. My parents were skeptical when they heard the news. "Shouldn't you take things slow?" Mom asked. "Are you sure you really know this man after just a few months?" "I've never been more certain of anything," I insisted. Jace turned on the charm for them. "I know we rushed into this engagement," he admitted, "but from the moment I saw Marla again, I just knew. She makes me want to be a better man." Mom and Dad eventually acquiesced with tentative blessings. We couldn't afford some lavish wedding, so we opted for a small ceremony at the courthouse with our families and closest friends. I used up most of my savings account on a simple white dress and reception dinner afterwards. But Jace looked at me like I was the most beautiful woman in the world as we exchanged vows, pledging our lives to one another. That night, wrapped blissfully in my new husband's arms, I sighed, "I can't believe we're finally married." Jace nestled his face into my hair. You've made me happier than I ever dreamed possible. As a wedding gift, Mom and Dad helped us buy a little 2-bedroom house in the suburbs. Consider it an investment in your new life together, Dad said. Admiration for Jace replacing his initial hesitations. My heart swelled gazing around our first home, picturing the family we would raise within these walls. Cleo came over the first week after our honeymoon, eager to see how I was settling in as a newlywed. You look happier than ever, she remarked. I hope Jace knows how lucky he is. I smiled radiantly. Oh, he tells me every day. My life felt richer and fuller by the month. As I rode this wave of marital bliss, the rapid pace of it all seemed irrelevant. I had everything I could want, the devoted husband, the cozy home, in-laws' approval. What more could a woman ask for? Doubts were a distant memory now. I had made the right choice marrying Jace. I just knew it. The first year of our marriage passed in a blissful blur, but as the honeymoon glow faded, I began noticing strange behaviors from Jace. He started disappearing for hours at a time, never telling me where he was going. Often he came home late reeking of alcohol, brushing off my worried questions. One night I awoke to find his side of the bed empty. The clock read 3:14 a.m. Sick with worry, I tried Jace's cell, but it went straight to voicemail. Where could he possibly be at this hour? At sunrise, he finally rolled in, clothes disheveled, clearly intoxicated. Where have you been? I demanded. I was scared sick. He just shot me a sheepish grin. Sorry, babe. The guys convinced me to grab some late-night drinks after work. I should have texted. I might have believed his flimsy excuse if it hadn't happened twice more that week. Jace claimed overtime or drinks with colleagues, but when I phoned his office to check, they insisted he had left at his normal time. One afternoon, I stumbled on receipts stuffed hastily in his pant pockets for a fancy necklace and resort hotel stay. Purchases we certainly couldn't afford on our household income. When I confronted Jace, he turned defensive. You're snooping now? Unbelievable. It was a work trip. The necklace is for you. I can't have privacy? He stormed off, leaving me standing there, receipt crumpled in my fist, feeling petty and ashamed. But I couldn't ignore the seed of doubt taking root inside me. The next time Jace disappeared, I drove to that resort and asked if a guest named Jace had checked in recently. I'm afraid we can't disclose private guest information, the manager said. Before I could plead further, recognition flashed in her eyes. Wait. I do remember him. Had drinks at our lounge bar with some blonde woman. Looked pretty friendly with her. The revelation knocked the wind out of me. When Jace came home that night, I unleashed on him. Who is she, Jace? The truth. He had the audacity to look wounded. What are you talking about? There's no one else, Marla. How could you accuse me of that? I followed one of your lies straight to that resort lounge, I retorted. They told me everything. Jace paced angrily. So now you're tracking my movements? Have you lost your mind? He stormed towards the door. I refused to endure this constant interrogation in my own home. As the door slammed shut behind him, it finally sank in. The man I loved was not the man I had married. Where had things gone so horribly wrong? Things between Jace and I went from bad to worse after that explosive argument. He was hardly ever home anymore. Strange charges began appearing on our credit card bill, and I could no longer ignore his chemical odor late at night, the dilated pupils and agitated manner. My husband had entered the world of hard drugs. I confronted Jace as he stumbled through our front door, eyes bloodshot and his shirt rumpled. Where have you been? Are you using? He glared defiantly, so I blew off some steam with friends. You gonna punish me for that, too? I saw the credit charges, Jace, I said. Motel rooms, jewelry. This isn't just a little recreational fun. You're lying, doing God knows what with God knows who. My voice broke on the verge of hysterics. This isn't the man I married. Jace seized my arms and shoved me against the wall. You want to know what I do late at night? He spat. Sometimes I'd rather be with anyone than lie next to your judgmental accusations. Hell, a good hooker accepts my payment without demanding a play-by-play. I pushed him away, stunned by this vicious stranger in my home. If you wanted out, you should have said so, I cried. Not drag this family through your sordid double life. Jace's lip curled into a sneer. Don't lecture me about family values, not when I bust my ass to provide for this one while you sit around policing my every move. His tirade cut me to the core. In desperation, I threatened divorce, but Jace just laughed coldly. You'll take me back, just like you always do, he taunted. Big, strong Marla, so tough, yet so gullible. His expression hardened. But cross me again, and you'll regret it. A chill ran down my spine at those words. That night, while Jace slept, I searched feverishly through his things. Buried deep, I uncovered baggies of white powder, seedy photos of Jace with strange women, thousands in ATM withdrawals. The cold truth stared back. This was no longer my husband, but a hostile imposter who had invaded our lives. In the dead of night, aware I was risking my safety, I began meticulously documenting Jace's more incriminating activities on my phone. A heated phone call with an unknown yelling over payments owed. Powder residue on his work desk. Unexplained furtive behavior in shadowy alleyways. As the evidence against Jace mounted, so did my agony over the man I had so foolishly entrusted my future to. Worse yet, now merely existing in the same house as Jace filled me with dread, never knowing when his hair-trigger temper might erupt again. Several weeks later, Cleo came over unexpectedly for our usual Saturday girls' brunch. As she chattered away, I mechanically pushed food around my plate, lost in thought, fingers probing the faded bruise on my upper arm hidden beneath a cardigan, a parting gift from Jace during our last scuffle. Cleo's eyes narrowed with concern. Marla? Gently she pulled my sweater sleeve back, revealing the ugly purple and yellow mark marring my skin. Her jaw dropped, comprehension dawning. Breaking down at last, I confessed everything. The lying, the cheating, now the fear of my own husband. Cleo enveloped me in her arms as I wept. Pack your bags, she said firmly. You're coming home with me. I sprung into action after that painful confrontation with Cleo, determined to shield myself from Jace's downward spiral. His threats still rang in my ears. Crossing him again would end badly for me. First, I stealthily withdrew over 10 grand from our dwindling savings to reopen my old personal checking account. If I made a run for it, I'd need quick access to funds. I stuffed essentials into bags stashed at Cleo's, ready to flee at a moment's notice. My next call was to an old college buddy who now worked in private investigation. I fed Conrad the names of seedy establishments Jace frequented and details of an assault charge during his Chicago days that Jace had conveniently omitted when we reconnected. I'll run full background checks, dig deeper into recent activity, Conrad assured me. We'll get clarity on who this guy really is. While anxiously awaiting Conrad's findings, I played the part of dutiful wife at home. Jace remained oblivious to my maneuvers as I continued logging evidence of his misdeeds. Most importantly, I kept close tabs on his packed schedule, noting when he slipped off for his illicit rendezvous. Late one evening, when Jace left for the office, I followed him at a distance to a rundown apartment complex and watched him disappear inside. Conrad's call came just as I witnessed a disheveled woman around Jace's age emerge looking dazed and hollow. Before she spotted me, I hit Conrad's number. Got back deep records on your husband, he reported grimly. Guy's in trouble. Mountains of gambling debt, suspected drug trafficking back in Chicago. He's dangerous, Marla. My blood turned to ice. So the man I had welcomed into my bed, my life, my family home, was a complete fraud, capable of God knows what ilk, if I exposed his lies. There's more. Conrad's voice dropped. Jace is wanted for assaulting his ex up north. Put her in the hospital with a concussion and 2 broken ribs when she tried leaving him. My knees buckled as Conrad described injuries mirroring my own concealed bruises. I realized then, Jace hadn't just duped me. He had methodically preyed upon my deepest longings to bind me helplessly to him before unleashing his demonic side. And I had danced straight into his trap. He won't let me walk away easily, I whispered, comprehending my grave misjudgment too late. Jace will seriously hurt me if he finds out what I know. We'll make sure that doesn't happen, Conrad said. I still have law enforcement contacts here. We'll get him arrested safely so you can get free. Wheels turning rapidly, I knew I needed allies for whatever endgame faced me, and Jace. Starting with my family's business, as office manager, I discreetly relocated precious client files and redirects company funds into protected accounts, shielding those assets from Jace's grasp. I strong-armed a bank associate into freezing the remaining savings under my name only. And I informed my family attorney on the sly about my situation, urging him to accelerate preparations for divorce. Finally, steeling myself before meeting Cleo later that week, I confessed my plan to set up Jace's downfall, regardless of the risk I faced. She squeezed my hand supportively. "I've got your back, girl, whatever happens next." The bait was set. I had arranged for an anonymous cash payment to be left at a discreet drop location after feeding Jace a fabricated work emergency. If all went according to plan, he would take the money and run, directly into our trap. My group of co-conspirators gathered at a rented office space near the drop point, reviewing our strategy. My family attorney briefed 2 plainclothes officers on Jace's history of assault. Cleo paced anxiously but nodded reassuringly when I caught her eye, and Conrad scanned area security feeds on a laptop, tracking Jace's movements. I peered over Conrad's shoulder as Jace's car appeared, pulling to the location described in the fake text I had shown him earlier. We held our breath, watching the grainy screen as Jace glanced around furtively before retrieving the parcel and speeding off. "He took the bait. Let's move," Conrad confirmed. We piled into 2 unmarked police vehicles, tailing Jace to a seedy motel on the outskirts of town. Undercover cameras captured him exiting his car, parcel tucked under one arm, looking smug as he entered a corner room. It was go time. I waited in the car, heart hammering, while the team stormed in. Even with the element of surprise on our side, the confrontation sounded ugly from my shelter around the corner. Crashing furniture, enraged yelling from Jace, cries of "Get your hands off me!" Then, silence. Moments later, Jace emerged in handcuffs, face mottled with rage as he realized my betrayal. "You set me up, you devious bitch," he roared, fighting against the restraints. "I'll kill you for this, Marla." I met his livid glare unflinchingly, let him spew threats. He was the one in chains now. As officers shoved Jace into the back of a squad car, grim satisfaction swelled within me. We had seized control from my tormentor at last. With the stolen cash and illegal substances found in Jace's possession, plus extensive documentation detailing his shady history, the police had enough evidence to hold him on felony charges. But the most damaging blow to Jace still awaited as part 2 of my plot unfolded. Hours after the motel sting, our town's elite gathered for a lavish business awards gala that I knew Jace planned to attend. Right on cue as the event kicked off, 2 uniformed officers marched through the glitzy ballroom entrance, eliciting audible gasps as they make a beeline for my table. My heart pounded with everyone's eyes upon me. "Marla Brooks, we need you to come with us," the taller officer stated while attendees gawked and murmured. "It's about your husband, ma'am." As instructed, I let out a strangled cry while the officers gently escorted me away. Before disappearing from sight, I glimpsed open-mouthed stares, my name echoing through the crowd. The spectacle was complete. No doubt word of Jace's shame would spread like wildfire. By dawn, his reputation in this town would be destroyed beyond repair. Alone in the ladies' room, I sagged against the wall as relief crashed over me. It was over. My nightmare at long last was finally over. I had reclaimed my life and my future. As tears spilled down my cheeks, an unexpected laugh escaped me. No more hiding, no more looking over my shoulder. I walked out into the night air reborn, unbound, the orange glow of streetlights welcoming me back to the world. In the weeks following Jace's dramatic arrest, I dove headfirst into legal proceedings, determined to nail his coffin shut. Restraining orders, divorce filings, lawsuits against Jace piled up on my attorney's desk as I sought financial and legal reparations. Most crucially, I provided police a full dossier documenting Jace's years of deception. The bruises concealed beneath layers of makeup, frantic texts sent furtively to friends whenever Jace lost his temper. My testimony was damning enough that prosecutors felt confident pursuing domestic assault charges alongside Jace's multiple drug and fraud offenses. When Jace appeared at his preliminary hearing, cocky as ever in an orange jumpsuit and shackles, his smug grin faded as formal charges were presented. His eyes burned with impotent fury when they landed on me sitting resolutely in the front row. The judge set harsh bail terms Jace had no means to meet. As guards dragged my soon-to-be ex back to his cell, his enraged screams echoed through the courtroom. "You'll pay for this, Marla! I promise you, you backstabbing whore!" His words no longer fazed me. They merely sealed his ultimate downfall. In the final divorce decree a month later, the judge took Jace to the cleaners. Due to irrefutable evidence of mental and physical abuse, I was granted our home, remaining household assets, and a hefty alimony settlement given my demonstrated resilience in the face of turmoil. "He deserves worse," Cleo fumed when reviewing the terms. "You went through hell thanks to Jace." I waved her off warily. "It's enough knowing karma caught up with him. With multiple felony charges, he'll spend years in prison. That's revenge enough." Rumor mills churned in our small suburban circle about sordid details of Jace's collapsed house of cards: drugs, cheating, physical assault. My divorce attorney arranged an exclusive tell-all interview for me with the local paper, cementing sympathy on my side. "Portray her as the courageous hero who prevailed despite unimaginable betrayal and abuse behind closed doors," my counsel directed. "She exposed a dangerous fraud and kept other women safe in the process." I confessed my whole gut-wrenching ordeal to the reporter, the subtle manipulation that seduced me, incremental violence excused away until it became intolerable, the elaborate sting operation that finally halted Jace's reign of terror. I ignored all the red flags because I so badly wanted to believe in second chances, I acknowledged. But some people cannot be saved. Now I advocate for stronger protections to prevent stories like mine. Public reaction to my published account was fiercely supportive. Well-wishers stopped me on the street, praising my bravery. Mothers with teenage daughters made me promise to visit their local high schools, so no other woman falls prey to toxic love like you did. Their faith in me to transform suffering into positive change moved me deeply. From my hometown to the halls of state legislature, I was living proof that even domestic violence victims could reclaim their strength. And redemption never tasted sweeter than the day State of Colorado versus Jace Eaton flashed across my phone screen, signifying the final death knell to my tormentor's devastation. Justice was served at last. With the smoke cleared from legal battles, I shifted focus to piecing my life back together. The house Jace and I had once shared became my solitary refuge, as I grieved the man I thought I married versus the monster revealed. Bitterness still arose occasionally over wasted years chained to Jace's deception. But anger no longer controlled me. Now purpose filled my days instead. Through counseling, I found wisdom and closure. My therapist inspired me to channel hardship into uplifting other women trapped in abusive cycles. "Transform your testimony into empowerment," she urged. "Let your story give hopeless victims the courage to break free." I began volunteering for a nonprofit domestic violence group, then joined their board to guide strategy. Within a year, I had spearheaded a broad outreach campaign called Rise Above that brought survivor stories into high schools and colleges. I shared my journey escaping Jace's grip to rapt audiences, refusing to gloss over uglier parts. "See this scar under my eye?" I would point out, a relic of Jace hurling a glass object. I once mistook rage for passion, but violence should never be normalized for the sake of love. My mission to advocate for at-risk women soon grew into a nonprofit venture I founded called New Dawn. We ran empowerment seminars, offered pro bono counseling and legal help, even temporarily housed women fleeing dangerous homes. 3 years later, New Dawn had expanded into 3 counties with a paid staff of 10 running daily operations. We opened new emergency shelters annually. I rubbed shoulders with state politicians and prominent activists as a respected leader in the field. One day, Cleo forwarded me a news article titled "Disgraced Businessman Sent Back to Jail," featuring Jace's scowling mugshot. I skimmed details of his failed parole attempt after serving time for drug charges tied to my case. A small flare of satisfaction rose in me knowing Florida penitentiaries would remain Jace's miserable dwelling. "New Dawn got a shout-out in that story on Jace," Cleo added proudly. "They credited your whole movement bringing light to domestic abuse issues locally." My eyes misted reading glowing praise for our collective impact. Perhaps my battered old soul still had some healing left to do. But staring at Jace's hardened criminal face, I felt only detachment, like gazing upon a stranger now. His power to haunt me had faded long ago. The chapter of my life defined by Jace's menacing presence had long since closed. In its place, a confident visionary and nurturer of broken spirits had emerged, one for whom peace and purpose now shaped days where uncertainty and fear once dwelled. Redemption manifests in many forms. Rarely does it arrive as we envisioned. But my second chance was never sweeter. What's for dinner? Jackson's words pierced the silence of our tense kitchen, his tone cold and dismissive as always. I froze, the venom in his voice draining the joy from my soul once again. How far we had fallen from those early dreamy days in Chicago when his smile filled me with delight. Now every word he uttered struck me with dread. I said nothing, responding only with silence. My hatred for the stranger Jackson had become sitting like a stone in my heart. He clicked his tongue, shaking his head as he strode out, granting me a few more minutes of hollow peace. My thoughts drifted to 5 years ago, when Jackson would surprise me with flowers and gifts, when our newborn son Eli would gaze at us like we held the secrets of the universe. I remembered the perfumed scent of happiness that seemed to follow us wherever we went. How blinded I was by illusions. The shrill ring of my phone cut through the silence. My mother-in-law, Eleanor, no doubt ready to yet again make veiled accusations about my failings as a wife and mother. "Avalon, I haven't seen my precious Eli in over a week," Eleanor complained. "I miss my darling boy." Her words were sweet, but her meaning clear. She wanted to see Eli without me sullying their visit. My role was to produce her prized grandchild, then vanish into the background. "We can arrange something soon," I said evenly, refusing to grovel at her feet and beg for scraps of affection. I would not let her control me any longer. That weekend, I planned an escape with Eli to visit my parents' farm, desperate for even a day's reprieve from the choking venom of Jackson and his manipulative mother. As soon as we arrived, Eli relaxed into the warm embrace of my parents, free from the smothering weight of the Stanhopes' expectations. Yet Jackson still found a way to ruin even this small oasis of peace. His barrage of demanding calls reminded me I did not have the luxury of freedom. I was trapped, bound by vows and violence. My only hope was Eli, my beloved boy, whose smile sustained me. As long as I had him, I could survive anything. When we returned, Eleanor's talons were out. She scolded Eli for being away so long, glaring at me as if I had committed an unforgivable sin by spending a weekend away. My son's eyes pooled with tears as she smothered him. This was my life now, a battlefield where my only ammunition was patience and resilience. I had to stay strong for Eli. Little did I know Jackson had schemes of his own brewing as he spun his web of lies against me. My friend Harper called, gushing about this amazing new widower she was seeing. My blood turned to ice when she described her whirlwind romance with none other than Jackson himself. Rage, betrayal, and humiliation tore through me like shrapnel. For this final treachery, Jackson would pay the ultimate price. My hands trembled as I set my phone down, Harper's bubbly voice still echoing in my mind. The initial shock gave way to anger as the reality of Jackson's betrayal sank in. My husband, the man I had built dreams with, now wooed my own friend behind my back. I had to warn Harper, though exposing Jackson's deception would no doubt ignite his rage towards me. My son Eli played on the living room floor as I composed myself before making the call, drawing strength from his innocence. "Avalon, I was just talking about you," Harper chirped. I cut through her enthusiasm sharply. "The man you're seeing, what's his name?" Jay Stanhope. Why do you ask?" she replied, surprise coloring her tone. Bile rose in my throat as my suspicions were confirmed. Jackson had spun a web of lies, preying on Harper's longing for love. I exposed his deception plainly, my voice quivering with anger and pain. A heavy silence followed, the weight of betrayal hanging between two friends. When I told Jackson I had uncovered his deceit, his expression hardened to stone. Eleanor watched with thinly veiled amusement as he exploded. "You had no right to meddle in my affairs," he bellowed. "Harper meant nothing, but your jealousy has cost me a valuable business connection." His callous words deepened the chasm between us. I was no longer his wife, just an obstacle to be demolished. Eleanor smirked, the chaos only furthering her twisted hold over her damaged son. In that moment I understood. It was time to leave. There was nothing left to salvage here. I had only endured this emotional warfare for my son's sake, but now I realized no child should see his mother thus degraded. As Jackson's tirade continued, I calmly packed our bags, comforting my confused and frightened son. Soon Eli would be safe and free from these toxins. I whispered a prayer of thanks that my parents had offered their farm as a refuge. Their warm embrace was medicine for my battered soul. Yet the Stanhope's venom followed us even to this pastoral escape. Eleanor and Jackson barraged me with calls and threats, promising to take Eli away for good. As my son played happily with my father's baby goats, blissfully unaware of the battle raging over him, my mother spoke words that would shape the course of my vengeance. Avalon, you must go back. Record their threats, document their lies, gather allies. Only then can you defeat them and free Eli from their clutches forever. I realized she was right. I had to shift from victim to warrior, or they would hunt me to the ends of the earth. If protecting my son meant destroying those who sought to harm us, so be it. I now understood the power I held as mother of Jackson's prized heir. Checkmate was still possible, no matter how ruthless the opponents. Jackson had dealt the first blow, but I would strike the final one. This was now a game of kings and pawns, where survivors take the prize. My son's future happiness hinged on my next moves. Failure was not an option. Too much was at stake. The kings would soon face their downfall. Returning to the battlefield took every ounce of my courage. Jackson's mask of civility had finally fallen, exposing the monster that lurked beneath. Home was now a minefield of emotional traps and verbal assaults. But my mother's words armed me for the fight ahead. I knew what needed to be done. I began documenting their deceit like an investigator, recording conversations, keeping a detailed log of Eleanor and Jackson's threats and manipulation. Though still nursing my wounds, I found purpose in preparing for the trials ahead. Justice would be done, no matter how powerful my adversaries imagined themselves to be. During a tense family dinner, Eleanor's snide comments pushed me to the edge. That Harper girl Jackson took up with, I knew she was familiar. Wasn't she your little friend, Avalon? Bile rose in my throat, but I simply gave a tight smile. I would not give her the satisfaction of seeing my pain. Jackson said nothing, suddenly finding his steak fascinating. After they left, I gently asked Eli about his time with his grandmother. The flower of innocence in his eyes wilted. She scares me sometimes, Mommy. Grandpa yells a lot, too. I don't like it there. His words ignited my fury once more. How dare they trample my son's fragile spirit and destroy the safety of his world? Jackson's mask fully fell away when I confronted him about his emotional abuse of our son. He shouted and slammed his fist on the table inches from my face. You turned my own son against me. I always knew you were inadequate as a mother. No wonder he prefers you. Eli began crying as his father raged. Seeing my son's tears, I swore Jackson would pay for every second of heartbreak he had caused. The next morning, as Jackson left on another suspicious business trip, I asked sweetly about his plans. His look of surprise at the sudden affection in my voice was satisfying. Little did he know I had installed tracking software on his phone and recording devices in his car. His villainy would soon be his undoing. My parents provided comfort from the emotional battlefield. Their embrace nourished my battered but unbroken spirit. Dad taught Eli to milk cows and make jam, simple joys that erased Jackson's poison. As I tucked my slumbering boy into bed, he murmured, "I feel safe here, Mommy." His peaceful sleep was answer to 100 prayers. When uncovering Jackson's location through the tracking software, I noted he had traveled to Harperstown for a suspicious overnight visit. The trap was set perfectly now. I could use his tryst as irrefutable evidence against him during divorce proceedings. Soon Eli and I would break free from these toxic chains forever. My chance for absolute victory was close at hand. I imagined Jackson and his mother utterly demolished by what I now held against them: videos, records, and witness accounts. They had played with fire by challenging me, never imagining the phoenix that could rise from my ashes. Now doom awaited them as karma prepared her devastating blow. My next family dinner was a viper's nest of passive aggression and thinly veiled threats. Eleanor made snide comments about my simple meatloaf, though just a year ago she had praised the same recipe. Jackson scrolled through his phone, not bothering to pretend interest in his wife and son any longer. I simply ate in silence, my quiet fury simmering beneath a mask of perfect calm. As I cleared the dishes after the tense meal, Eleanor cornered me. "Avalon, don't you realize you're preventing Jackson from reaching his full potential? The boy needs a proper partner, one from the right kind of family." Her words poured acid into my heart, but I did not flinch. I think a divorce would be best for everyone. Jackson has already found a more suitable match. At this final insult, something broke free inside me, a righteous rage against injustice that blocked out all fear. Meeting Eleanor's glare calmly, I replied, "If you try to take my son from me, I will reduce your entire family to ashes." Shock registered on her face. She clearly underestimated the strength a mother finds when defending her cub. Returning home, I ignored Jackson's drunken ramblings, mentally preparing for war. My nerves were iron. I felt no trace of doubt. Securing Eli's future meant annihilating my enemies by any means necessary. I had already endured the worst pain they could inflict. Their blows only honed my will to survive. I edited my documentation, tightening it into an impenetrable legal trap guaranteed to favor me in court. Jackson's credibility would be shattered, Eleanor's manipulation exposed. Justice would soon arrive on swift wings. Over the next weeks, I wore a disguise of normalcy while secretly meeting lawyers and a private detective to build my case. Arthur, an old family friend on the force, provided legal advice I knew Jackson would never see coming. Weeks of planning in secret were about to yield dark and brutal fruit. Soon after Jackson left for a work emergency, no doubt code for meeting Harper, I followed him at a distance in a rented car. As expected, he drove straight to her apartment where she welcomed him with a kiss. The sight turned my stomach, but I captured images to twist the knife during divorce proceedings. My evidence folder grew thicker by the day. When Jackson returned the next morning reeking of Harper's perfume, I calmly informed him I wanted full custody of Eli and would be seeking a restraining order. A satisfying flicker of panic flashed across his arrogant face. The predator had just realized he had become prey. My mercy towards him evaporated like dewdrops in this moment. All that remained was the satisfied hum of sweet revenge. Jackson exploded into wrathful threats when I revealed my legal plans, confirming once and for all the true ugliness festering within him. He slammed his fists and overturned furniture, spewing graphic ways he would make me suffer. As he raged, I simply tapped a button on my phone to start an audio recording. His venomous words would seal his fate in court. I stood motionless as his anger crashed over me like waves over a rock. When his tirade finally exhausted itself, I stepped forward calmly. "I once loved the man you pretended to be, but now I see the truth. You will never hurt me or my son again." Jackson's face contorted into a hateful sneer. "You poisonous witch! I should have crushed your spirit years ago. My mother always warned you would betray me." He turned and stormed away, no doubt seeking solace between Harper's sheets. I had known divorce would provoke his inner demons, but I welcomed the confrontation. The law would grant me sole custody the moment I presented a fragment of the evidence I now held against Jackson and Eleanor. Justice would be done. In the quiet aftermath, I noticed Eli watching from the hallway, holding his stuffed bear in fear. I enveloped my son in fierce love, sadness mingling with relief that he had witnessed his father's true colors. "Don't worry, my darling. We are going to be happy and safe soon. I promise." Our new apartment provided refuge as the divorce exploded into being. On my lawyer's advice, I took Eli and moved out quickly, leaving Jackson snarling threats in our empty house. The legal team efficiently turned my evidence against my husband and mother-in-law into an airtight case for full custody of my son. Meanwhile, Jackson spiraled into self-destruction, drunk and violent. His business trips to meet Harper did little to numb his rage at losing control of me and his prized son. His mother desperately tried to restrain his reckless behavior, fearing damage to her family's esteemed social status. But the foundations of her carefully curated image were cracking. Soon Jackson would bring the whole rotting edifice crumbling down. Harper tried calling me, stuttering apologies filled with excuses about Jackson manipulating her loneliness. I simply wished her well with a smile. She was not to blame for my husband's deceit. In truth, I pitied her, for Jackson would surely break her heart too once he had extracted all he needed from her, then toss her aside. Berating Harper would serve no purpose, so I focused on my true goal, severing all ties to my abusers. The turning point arrived during an ugly custody hearing, where my ironclad documentation and audio evidence demolished any defense Jackson tried to mount. As he fumed, Eleanor screeched accusations, and their lawyer sat in stunned silence. I maintained perfect, smiling calm. I had played the long game masterfully, luring them into revealing their own wretchedness before systematically destroying them. Soon Eli and I would be reborn from the ashes of the Stanhope's smoldering ruin. The day of reckoning arrived with poetical perfection on Thanksgiving. I had invited Harper along with Jackson and Eleanor, presenting the image of a perfect hostess. My real purpose was setting the stage for their final demolishment. I had told Harper part of the truth, that Jackson had deceived us both and was still clinging to her. But she foolishly insisted on seeing the best in him, still enchanted by his hollow charm. Well, her naive blindness would end today. My parents joined us, bolstering my drive for justice. My evidence file and lawyer's number waited in my room, ready for use. I had forwarded videos of Jackson's raging threats along with records of Eleanor's manipulation to key contacts as insurance. If I did not make it through today unscathed, their own ugliness would trigger mutually assured destruction. When the Stanhopes arrived, I received them warmly, playing the role of forgiving ex-wife to lure them into complacency. Jackson overplayed the charm while Eleanor critiqued the menu I had slaved over, predictably ungrateful. During dinner, I made sure to position Harper beside Jackson. My friend giggled and blushed whenever he whispered flirtatiously in her ear. Watching them, my family members bristled with outrage on my behalf. I gave them subtle signals to wait as baiting my trap. Justice would be served cold. Dessert was interrupted by the ring of Jackson's phone. He glanced at the screen and silenced it quickly. But my hawk-eyed mother caught a glimpse of the name Amanda with a heart emoji before it disappeared from view. I seized the moment, my fury channeled into an eagle's deadly resolve. Looking directly at Harper, I asked gently, "Jackson, darling, who was that calling?" All eyes froze on my husband as he gulped nervously. Turning to my friend, I continued, "Harper, do you know if Jackson sees other women?" My words hung in the air like a guillotine blade, because he certainly lied to both of us. As understanding dawned on Harper's face, her shock quickly morphed into humiliation and heartbreak. As she erupted in sobs, my family surrounded her in solidarity, while Eleanor watched in horror as her web of lies fell apart. Jackson sat mute and stone-faced at the unraveling of his schemes. The leading man had lost control of his plot. I ended the final act by placing my evidence binder on the table. As my parents comforted Harper, I calmly informed Jackson he would sign the divorce settlement immediately, granting me full custody. Refuse, and this evidence destroys what remains of your life. My words rang with cold authority. Justice had been served. In the aftermath, Jackson's world collapsed with satisfying swiftness. My evidence proved his deceit was far more extensive than I had even realized. The detailed records showed him shamelessly manipulating numerous women for money and status, with Harper and I as just two in a long string of victims of his scams. With his credibility and social standing annihilated, Jackson descended rapidly into recklessness. He was fired from his prestigious family firm after showing up drunk to an important client meeting. Reports soon surfaced of him getting into fistfights at bars and clubs. His engagement to longtime girlfriend Amanda ended bitterly amid cheating allegations. Eleanor, once so proud and domineering, became a social pariah, shunned for enabling her son's abusive behavior. The Stanhope family name lay in tatters. She retreated from public view, suddenly plagued by poor health with no one left to dote on her. My mother commented it was likely her heart had shriveled so completely that her body could no longer sustain itself. I felt no pity watching the old crone reap what she had sown. With the Stanhopes decimated, I focused fully on rebuilding my life with Eli. My divorce settlement allowed me to buy a lovely home near my parents, where Eli and I discovered tranquility once more. I returned to work at the local library, finding meaning in simple joys and community after years trapped in toxic chaos. My only lingering anger was towards the justice system that had allowed Jackson to inflict maximum damage on me despite mounds of evidence. The lawyer fees had nearly bankrupted me even as Jackson walked free with light penalties. I now understood how power and privilege stacked the odds, forcing victims to fight tooth and nail for basic dignity. Harper remained a steadfast friend, helping me advocate for legal support for abused women struggling to escape manipulative partners. Her warmth and loyalty proved she was a victim as well. Together we found healing and meaning. One morning I arrived early to open the library and noticed a delivery by the back door. A beautiful bouquet of flowers waited in a vase with an unsigned note reading simply, Please forgive me. I recognized Harper's handwriting immediately. We cried together as 8 years of pain and betrayal washed away, leaving only relief that the long nightmare was over. A week later, my lawyer informed me that several women allegedly assaulted by Jackson had successfully pressed charges against him based on my evidence. He now awaited trial behind bars. The country club playboy had lost everything from his kingdom to his freedom itself. Justice had caught up to him at long last, as I knew it would. Watching Eli dance carefreely at my parents' summer picnic, his laughter healing old wounds, I knew I had reclaimed what mattered most. The predators who once haunted us would never steal our joy again. The past was just a fading nightmare banished by the dawn. The voicemail was like a sledgehammer through glass. I stared at my phone, pulse racing, hands trembling. It couldn't be. Not after all this time. Marissa, hey, it's Declan. I'm back in town tonight and thought maybe I could crash at our place. We should talk. Our place. The nerve. I drew a ragged breath, gripping the countertop to steady myself. 3 years of rebuilding my life alone, brick by painful brick. 3 years of providing for our daughter while he gallivanted to find himself. And now he thought he could just waltz right back in? Mom, you okay? I blinked hard. Elise stood watching me cautiously, backpack slung over one small shoulder. I managed a shaky smile. Yeah, sweetheart. Go on, or you'll be late. After she left, I sagged against the refrigerator, waves of nausea and anger crashing over me. This wasn't happening. Not now, when Elise and I finally had stability, when I finally felt whole again. I replayed his message, bile rising. Make some space for me. Unbelievable. What about the space he'd left in our lives when he abandoned his family, when he disappeared without warning or child support? Did he expect me to forget so easily, to pretend our years of hardship hadn't happened? My hands curled into fists as tears burned my eyes. I swiped them away roughly. No. I was done crying over that man. I'd spent too many nights consoling our daughter when she asked where Daddy was, why he didn't love us anymore. Too many days working 2 jobs just to keep us afloat, selling memories to pay for groceries. My knuckles whitened, the anguish and self-doubt I'd endured when he vanished without explanation. It had nearly destroyed me. But Elise had needed me, so I'd carried on. Alone and exhausted, but carrying on nonetheless, and slowly the wounds began to heal. The nights grew easier, my daughter's laughter more frequent. I gazed around my tidy kitchen, summoning the resolve that had held us together all this time. No, I would not let Declan unravel everything now, not when we'd finally found stable ground. He gave up the right to be part of our lives long ago. I reached for the phone with quiet determination, deleted his message. Then I blocked his number. Whatever he wanted, neither Elise nor I owed him a moment more of our time or sanity. The past was done. I had a PTA meeting to plan for, parent conferences next week. A little girl who needed me focused and fully present. I straightened my shoulders, that familiar strength rooting into my bones once more. I slid the casserole into the oven, forehead creased in thought. Elise perched at the table coloring, ponytail bobbing as she hummed. Watching her, the familiar ache bloomed in my chest. She was the mirror image of Declan, those wide, dark eyes, the spray of freckles across her nose. Even her mannerisms echoed his, down to the way she chewed her lip when concentrating. My jaw tightened. He should be here sharing this scene, not off chasing self-serving dreams while his daughter grew up without a father. I'd spent endless hours listening to Elise wonder why Daddy didn't tuck her in at night or attend her school plays and piano recitals. Why he didn't want us anymore. When will Daddy visit? She'd asked endlessly those first bleak years, her small face etched with confusion. Doesn't he love me? And I could only gather her close, choking back angry tears as I whispered platitudes and smoothed her hair. Because how could I explain that her beloved father had thrown us aside without warning, that he'd left us drowning under a tidal wave of bills, our accounts bone dry? I still recalled removing her from ballet class in tears because the payments had become impossible. The shame and despair of those days haunted me. Yet despite it all, Elise's innocent faith in Declan persisted. Night after night, she'd gaze at the stars making fervent wishes for his return. My heart fractured a little more with each tiny prayer. And now here he was, waltzing back as if no time had passed, acting as if he deserved access to our lives. I gritted my teeth, fury and bitterness roiling through me. What gave him the right after all the unanswered calls and attorney's letters demanding child support, which he'd ignored completely? Did he comprehend even an ounce of the agony he'd put us through? Elise glanced up just then, grinning broadly as she held up her drawing. "Look, Mommy, it's you and me, and Daddy. Do you think he'll come visit for Christmas?" My stomach twisted at the hope glowing from her sweet face. Gathering my composure with effort, I managed a tense smile. "We'll have to wait and see, love. Now, want to help stir the corn?" As she trailed behind me eagerly to the stove, I squared my shoulders with quiet resolve. Declan may believe he could resurrect his role as husband and father on a whim, but I would not stand by and let him trample our healing hearts again. I woke with a start, momentarily confused by the pre-dawn light filtering through the blinds. Then the memories came flooding back. Declan's message. His audacity after all this time. I groaned, scrubbing at my gritty eyes with the heels of my hands. Despite my exhaustion, sleep had eluded me most of the night. My mind kept voice conjuring emotions I thought I'd firmly buried. Anger, disbelief, the sting of that old betrayal. Sometime near dawn, I must have finally drifted off, too spent for my churning thoughts to keep at bay any longer. But now morning had arrived, heralding the start of another day I'd have to battle recurring ghosts. I dragged myself from bed, wincing at the throbbing behind my temples. In the muted light, I studied my reflection as I dressed for work. The drawn face staring back evoked the battered young woman I'd been in the aftermath of Declan's abandonment. The one who had cried herself to sleep for months, struggling to provide for a heartbroken little girl despite the yawning abyss where my savings used to be. I'd walked a tortuous road to regain my footing after he left. I couldn't resurrect that buried anguish now. Wouldn't. In the kitchen, I braced my hands against the smooth countertop, gathering my resolve. When Declan split, I'd eventually pick myself up and put one determined foot in front of the other until I could stand tall again. I owed it to myself and Elise to keep marching forward, not get dragged backwards by my ex-husband's latest whim. As I filled travel mugs with coffee, fury simmered through my veins. How dare he presume to still have any place in our lives? To believe he could breeze in and out whenever it suited him with no thought to those left scraping up the wreckage? No, I refused to permit it. Not this time. If Declan imagined he'd receive anything besides cold resentment from me, then reality would give him a brisk wake-up call. I would cordially inform him once that he'd extinguished any rights as a husband or father long ago. The aftermath was his mess to wade through. Elise wandered sleepy-eyed into the kitchen just then, her dark curls riotous. I smoothed them gently, heart clenching at her sweetness as I pressed a bowl of cereal into her hands. Whatever Declan's reasons for returning, I bore responsibility now for shielding my daughter from additional hurt. She'd endured enough confusion and disappointment already. This time I would guard the fragile new life we'd built, fortified by hard-won wisdom and resolve. Let Declan make his excuses elsewhere. When it came to my family, the door was firmly closed. I slid the key into the lock, balancing a bag of groceries on one hip. As the door swung open, I froze. There was Declan, sprawled on my living room sofa as if he belonged there. Watching TV and drinking a beer like this was any regular Tuesday night. The bag thudded to the floor. Declan glanced over, irritation flashing across his face. "Hey, careful with the bruise. Get out," I hissed through gritted teeth. Inside, emotions churned violently. "You have no right to be here." With exaggerated calm, Declan killed the TV and arched an eyebrow. "Is that any way to greet your husband after 3 years?" "Ex-husband," I spat. "Or did you miss the divorce paperwork while you were off finding yourself? Now get out before I call the police." Declan had the audacity to appear wounded. "Come on, Marissa. Can't we talk about this civilly? I've missed you two." A bitter laugh escaped my lips. "Missed us? Is that what you call completely abandoning your family? Refusing to help provide for your daughter even after the court-mandated child support?" Red-hot anger licked through me when he merely shrugged. I was in a tough financial spot myself, trying to get my business off the ground. And that justified leaving Elise and I destitute? My voice shook. For us to struggle just to survive while you gallivanted around pursuing your dreams? Declan's nonchalant mask slipped at the verbal slap, eyes narrowing dangerously. Watch it. Marissa, he warned, crossing his arms. You're one to talk anyway. Didn't take you long to replace me, now did it? Get out, I repeated through clenched teeth. I trembled with the urge to claw that smug expression off his face. Whatever pathetic reasons you've conjured to explain abandoning your family, I don't want to hear them. It's too late. You're dead to us. Declan shot to his feet then, features twisting. For an instant, I thought he might get violent and tensed. But after a seething moment, he seemed to get himself under control. You can play hardball all you want, but I'm back for good, he snarled. We're still married in the eyes of God, even if you decided to throw away our sacred vows. Don't think this is over. He stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. I jumped before sagging back against the wall, shaking all over. My pulse roared in my ears. This was bad. Declan had never handled not getting his way well, and by his behavior just now, he intended to make things very ugly before he gave up again. I had to protect Elise. Bereft of immediate options, I could only slide to the floor in front of the bolted door, head in hands. The peaceful life I'd rebuilt from ashes was crumbling before my eyes. And this time, I feared Declan himself posed the greatest threat to my daughter's well-being. I ushered Elise into the apartment, scanning the rooms cautiously. My spine prickled as I secured deadbolts and flipped lights, peering into shadowy corners, but the rooms appeared untouched. In the kitchen, I checked the locks on the back door and windows, pulse thrumming. Declan still had a key, and his words keep echoing through my mind. We're still married in God's eyes. This isn't over. A noise made me whirl. Elise hovered at the fridge, features pinched. Mom, what's going on? Why are you acting so weird? It's nothing, sweetie. I attempted a reassuring smile that felt more like a grimace. A worried 8-year-old didn't need to know her father had basically threatened us. Not yet anyway. I started dinner preparations, jaw tight. Declan's reappearance had cracked open the fault lines I thought healed over. The security I'd rebuilt for Elise now threatened to crumble thanks to him barreling back in, all arrogant entitlement instead of remorse for his absence. After demolishing grilled cheese sandwiches, Elise wandered off to finish homework, subdued. My chest tightened watching her go. She'd already endured enough disappointment where her father was concerned. She deserved consistency and stability now, not Declan's melodrama and empty promises. As I washed up the supper dishes, resolve hardened my spine. Elise came first, period. For 3 years, I'd mastered that balance alone. Now the stakes were higher, but my commitment hadn't wavered. I would fiercely protect the peaceful life we'd carved out, even if confronting Declan's toxicity was inevitable to secure our safety. Right on cue, an insistent knock rattled the front door. I squared my shoulders and stalked through the living room as fury kindled in my chest. Tonight, Declan would receive his final warning. Either stay away for good or force my hand against him legally to guarantee Elise's well-being. I wrenched open the door, angry words dying on my lips. Declan sagged against the doorframe, clutching a mostly empty bottle of Jack Daniels. Behind him, the front yard was strewn with our overturned trash cans, contents scattered across dead grass. My heart sank at the spiteful spectacle. His bloodshot gaze raked over me, features twisting into an ugly sneer. "Hey there, gorgeous," he slurred. "Gonna invite your husband in for a drink?" His cackling laughter raised the hair on my arms. Disgust and alarm warred through me at his deteriorated state. Declan had always been a mean drunk, but this went beyond rational behavior. Had his years away unraveled him completely? Over his hulking shoulder, I registered our elderly neighbor, Mrs. Tavers, peering wide-eyed from her cracked door down the hall. Heart in my throat, I blocked Declan's lurching entry with my shoulder. "You need to leave," I warned sharply. "Now, before I call the police." His hand shot out, shoving me hard. I stumbled backwards with a gasp as he bowled his way inside, bottle dangling from one fist. Mrs. Tavers hastily shut her door. Declan invaded my space, liquor fumes and unhinged fury burning from him. "Get Elise. We're going home." I retreated slowly toward the kitchen, pulse thundering. No way would I let this monster near my daughter tonight. The baseball bat still leaned just inside the pantry. If persuasion failed, I knew with sudden cool clarity I would use it without hesitation. "Get back!" I warned, fingers wrapped tightly around the bat's handle. Declan blinked slowly, swaying, his lip curled when he registered the weapon. Gonna take a swing at me, Riss? Didn't peg you as the violent type. I angled my chin defiantly. I'll do what it takes to protect my daughter. Now leave. His mocking grin faded. Belligerence hardened his eyes. I told you we're going home. As a family. He took a threatening step forward. Outrage spiked through me. We stopped being a family when you abandoned us. Declan roared and hurled the Jack Daniels bottle. I ducked instinctively and it exploded against the wall, amber liquid raining down. Don't you dare speak to me that way, he bellowed, spraying spittle. Ungrateful after everything I did for you. He lunged then. I swung wildly with the bat, the hollow thwack of solid wood connecting with flesh and bone echoing through the chaotic room. Declan stumbled sideways with a garbled shout, crashing into the upended kitchen table. Chest heaving, I clutched the bat in trembling hands. Sick adrenaline flooded my system at having struck him. But the darkened glint in Declan's eyes as he dragged himself upright spurred only stark purpose. Protect Elise at all costs. I darted into the hallway, intent on barricading us in my bedroom. But Elise stood frozen outside her room, features white with shock above the rumpled unicorn tee she still hadn't outgrown. Behind me, Declan roared incoherently. Get back inside, I urged her desperately. She remained rooted in place, tears rising. Why is Daddy so angry? Why did you hit him? Her small voice quavered with confusion and fear. I grabbed her shoulders, my own vision blurring fast. Oh, baby, I'm sorry. Daddy isn't well right now. I had to get her to safety. Everything will be all right, but you need to. Enraged bellowing shredded the rest of my plea. Elise's eyes rounded in dismay a split second before I felt myself airborne. We crashed excruciatingly into the linen closet doors. My head ricocheted off unforgiving drywall and stars exploded across my vision. I slumped in dazed agony, ears ringing. Somewhere through the nauseating haze I heard Elise shrieking. I struggled to sit up, gaping through swelling eye sockets at Declan's hulking form stomping toward my cringing daughter. No! I choked out through the inferno raging inside my skull. Elise backpedaled swiftly into her room, but Declan caught her door before it slammed shut. I dragged my leaden body across the carpet, screaming her name. Declan reappeared, massive hand engulfing the back of Elise's neck as she sobbed wildly. We're leaving! He spat, face mottled and nose gushing crimson down his scruffy chin. He looked unhinged and dangerous at a cellular level. Should have come willingly. Through the neighbors shouting and Elise hysterical pleas for me, icy resolve solidified, eclipsing everything else. I would not lose my daughter tonight. If stopping Declan meant killing him with my bare hands, then so be it. Marissa Walsh? I glanced up from the forms the nurse had given me. 2 officers stood in the doorway, the same pair who'd responded when Declan tried kidnapping Elise. I straightened gingerly. Yes? Beside me, Elise eyed them warily from beneath an ice pack as she clutched my hand. Sorry to intrude. We apprehended your ex attempting to break into your apartment again. He'd managed to pick the back lock. Claims the place still belongs to him. I pressed trembling fingers to my lips, pulse spiking. Elise huddled closer with a whimper. My mouth went dry. What happens now? The officers traded looks. Unfortunately, since his name is still on the lease, we can't charge him with breaking and entering. But we brought him in for the outstanding warrant regarding the assault and attempted kidnapping incident. My knees went loose. No immediate reprieve from Declan's harassment even with him jailed? It wasn't remotely fair or just. I scooped Elise close as she started crying softly. The officers shifted, pained empathy plain on their faces. We know it's not ideal, the younger one offered quietly, but our hands are tied legally from keeping him away for good, unless... His gaze cut to Elise's battered face and anger flashed across his youthful features. Look, the judge set Declan's bail prohibitively high, and we notified CPS about your daughter's condition, plus the previous child support non-compliance. He hesitated. I probably shouldn't say this, but we also conducted a thorough search of that apartment after arresting your ex. Let's just state that he won't be making bail anytime soon. A violent tremor ripped through me. Whatever contraband they'd uncovered didn't matter. Only guaranteeing Elise's safety from this monster counted now. I focused dully on the officers' solemn faces. What should we do? Declan made threats about coming after us again. Can you stop him? Their grave expressions reflected what I already knew deep down, that the legal system could only constrain someone like my ex-husband for so long. Sooner or later he'd charm his way free again, and next time he might successfully spirit Elise away forever. A bone-deep wariness engulfed me. I'd devoted years to painstakingly rebuilding security for my daughter after Declan's shattering betrayal. Now, despite police intervention and restraining orders, his abuse and manipulation still dominated our lives from behind bars. I tuned back in as the officers offered platitudes about changing the locks and extra patrols near our apartment until Declan's case went to trial. My fingers curled protectively through Elise's baby-fine hair, worthless stopgaps when dealing with a narcissist like my ex. As they left, I kissed Elise's damp cheek, voice unwavering. This ends now, baby girl. Let's go pack. I won't risk him finding us again. Leaving everything familiar behind meant nothing if it secured her safety. I would burn cities to ash first before letting Declan destroy Elise's life further. 6 months later. Name? I met the bored gaze of the station guard evenly. Marissa Walsh, and my daughter Elise. A flicker of interest crossed the woman's face. Message received. She remembered the high-profile case. Sign here. I'll buzz you in. Elise shifted nervously, confusion and curiosity playing across her delicate features beneath summer freckles as we were escorted inside. I gave her a gentle, reassuring squeeze. My heels clicked decisively across the grimy tile, syncing with the thunderous cadence of my pulse. Anticipation and simmering rage kindled with every step nearer to the secure visitation room. Declan's sentencing was today on multiple charges, from kidnapping to possession with intent to distribute. The fastidious search of our old apartment had unveiled a cornucopia of illicit substances and dealings. The officers who'd tipped me off about the contraband discoveries had advised us not to attend the trial given the volatility. But I needed closure. Elise, too, though she didn't fully understand that yet. I'd shielded her these months from Declan's continued threats and maneuverings. Instead, I'd channeled frantic energy into moving us cross-country, into my brother's guest room back east while I slowly rebuilt stability again. But before leaving that chaotic former life forever, Elise and I deserved finality. So I'd made arrangements to see Declan one last time on his way to sentencing, to make certain he grasped the damage inflicted and pain caused were irrevocable, that his poison could never taint our future happiness, if I had any say. The guard ushered us into a small room empty except for a grimy table and plastic chairs. Elise eyed me uncertainly. I managed an encouraging wink just as the door reopened. Flanked by 2 impassive guards, Declan shuffled inside. His contemptuous bravado had evaporated between the damning evidence and prospect of hard time. He seemed diminished in his orange jumpsuit, face at once familiar and that of a defeated stranger. Exactly how I wanted him. I rose slowly. Behind me, Elise fidgeted, anxiety rolling off her. I nodded once at Declan but addressed my daughter gently. It's okay, sweetheart. We're just here to say goodbye before they take him away for a long time. Declan blanched. I skewered him with smoldering satisfaction, letting venom etch my words. Did you want to tell Daddy why we're leaving him forever? When Elise just peered at the floor miserably, I stepped forward, eyes blazing. Well then, let me do the honors. I proceeded to clinically detail every vile deed and repercussion, reveling in Declan's shrinking frame. I spoke Elise's pain, my terror, and destitution. By the end, Declan appeared utterly extinguished. I leaned in, breath hot on his pallid cheek. She's free of you, they both are. I kissed Elise's hair, breathing in her goodness and light, before spinning sharply away. Behind me, Declan sputtered useless protests, truly a master of nothing any longer. I strode into sunshine without a backwards glance, Elise's small hand tucked firmly inside mine. The fluorescent lights of the hospital room flickered, casting long shadows that seemed to dance on the walls. I was propped up in my bed, a myriad of tubes and monitors attached to me, when Ethan walked in. His gait was confident, almost too confident for someone who was supposed to be recovering from major surgery. My surgery. The surgery where I had given him a part of me, quite literally, to save his life. Laura, we need to talk, Ethan began, avoiding my gaze. His voice was steady, but there was an undercurrent of unease. I nodded, bracing myself for what was to come, but nothing could have prepared me for his next words. I think we should get a divorce. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I felt as if the ground had been yanked from under me. What? I managed to choke out, my voice barely above a whisper. Ethan finally met my gaze, his eyes cold and detached. Look, Laura, you can't take care of the house or me anymore. This situation has made it clear. You're not the partner I need. I was stunned into silence. The man who stood before me, the man I had loved and cared for, seemed like a stranger. But I just gave you part of my liver. I saved your life. My voice cracked with emotion, a mixture of disbelief and anger bubbling to the surface. That's just it, Laura. You did save my life, and I'll be forever grateful. But gratitude isn't enough to sustain a marriage. We've been drifting apart for years, and this is just the final straw. His words cut deeper than any scalpel ever could. I had laid on that operating table for him, endured pain and risked my life, and this was how he repaid me? With coldness and divorce papers? You knew what you were signing up for when we got married, I retorted, my anger rising. You promised to be there in sickness and in health, or does that only apply when it's convenient for you? Ethan sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. I know what I said, Laura, but people change, situations change. I need to think about my future, and I can't see you in it anymore. I wanted to scream, to lash out, to tell him how unfair this was, but the words died in my throat. Instead, I whispered, So this is it? You're abandoning me when I need you the most? It's not like that, Laura. I can't be the person you want me to be. I'm sorry. Without another word, Ethan turned and left the room, leaving me alone with my thoughts and a heart shattered into a million pieces. As the door clicked shut, a bitter laugh escaped my lips. The irony of it all wasn't lost on me. Ethan, the man who couldn't bear the thought of caring for his sick wife, was alive because of me. And now he was walking away, free to live his life, while I lay here, broken and betrayed. In that moment, a fire ignited within me, burning away the remnants of my affection for Ethan. He wanted a divorce? Fine. But I wouldn't make it easy for him. I would fight back, and I would make sure he regretted this day for the rest of his life. The days turned into weeks, and the hospital room felt more like a prison than a place of healing. Each day blended into the next, marked only by the visits from doctors and the occasional obligatory check-in from Ethan's family, who seemed more concerned with his well-being than mine. It was during one of these long, lonely afternoons that I found myself reflecting on the past, on how Ethan and I had arrived at this painful juncture. Our story began at the small publishing firm where we both worked. Ethan, with his keen insight into political affairs, and I, a hopeful comic artist, found ourselves drawn together by our shared ambition and love for the written word. Our relationship blossomed quickly, fueled by late-night discussions about our dreams and aspirations. Ethan was charming, passionate about his work, and seemingly devoted to me. When he proposed, it felt like a dream come true. However, the dream began to crumble soon after our wedding. Ethan's career took off, and he became consumed by his work, leaving me to manage the household alone. Our conversations, once filled with mutual respect and understanding, turned into heated debates about my role in our marriage. You knew what you were getting into when you married me, Laura, Ethan would say whenever I voiced my loneliness or dissatisfaction. I need a partner who supports my career, not someone who needs constant attention. I remember trying to express how isolated I felt, only to be met with dismissal. Laura, you're overreacting. We're doing fine. You just need to find something to keep you busy, he'd respond, his eyes glued to his phone or laptop, never really seeing me. The realization that Ethan saw me more as a convenience than a partner was a bitter pill to swallow. I threw myself into my comics, pouring my heart and soul into the panels, trying to fill the growing void between us. My characters lived vibrant, fulfilling lives, stark contrasts to my own, which seemed to be shrinking with each passing day. It was during a family gathering that Ethan's mother, perhaps sensing my growing despair, pulled me aside. Laura, I'm sorry. Ethan has always been driven, but you don't deserve to be pushed aside. You're family now, and we're here for you, even if he's not. Those words, meant to comfort, only deepened my sense of failure. How had my life become a series of apologies and excuses for the man I loved? Our marriage, once the source of my happiness, had become a facade. I was living with a man who valued his career and social standing more than our relationship. A man who believed my sacrifice and support were simply parts of the role I had agreed to play. The love and partnership I had once believed in had dissolved into a business arrangement, one that Ethan was now seeking to terminate because I had become an inconvenient liability. As I lay in the hospital bed staring at the sterile white walls, I realized that Ethan's request for a divorce wasn't just the end of our marriage, it was my chance to reclaim my life. No longer would I be the silent supporter, the convenient wife. I would fight back, not just for the sake of revenge, but to regain my dignity and self-worth. Ethan thought he could discard me after everything I had done for him, after I had literally given a piece of myself to save his life. But I would show him that I was more than just a caretaker, more than just his wife. I was Laura Barnes, and I would not be underestimated. The resolve that had sparked in me the day Ethan walked out of my hospital room had now turned into a roaring blaze. I was ready to face whatever came next, armed with the truth and a newfound strength that Ethan had never seen. The day Ethan was diagnosed with cirrhosis was the day our fragile semblance of a marriage was put to the ultimate test. I remember the cold, clinical tone of the doctor as he explained the severity of Ethan's condition. "Without a liver transplant, Mr. Barnes's prognosis is very poor," he had said, his gaze shifting between Ethan and me. Ethan's reaction was one of sheer denial. There must be some mistake. "I feel fine," he protested, but the evidence was irrefutable. The lifestyle he had led, the endless work events accompanied by heavy drinking, had taken their toll. It was then, in the stark, impersonal hospital room, that Ethan turned to me with a desperation I had never seen in him before. "Laura, you're my only hope. Please, I need you." The weight of his plea hung heavily between us. Despite everything, the part of me that had loved him, that still cared for him on some level, couldn't turn away. "If I'm a match, I'll do it," I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. The tests confirmed that I was indeed a suitable donor, and the surgery was scheduled. The days leading up to it were a blur of paperwork, medical consultations, and a profound sense of loneliness. Ethan's family thanked me, their gratitude genuine, yet tinged with the unspoken acknowledgement of Ethan's role in his own predicament. "Thank you, Laura. You're doing a brave thing," Ethan's mother had said, her eyes wet with unshed tears. But Ethan's response was markedly different, almost indifferent, as if he considered my sacrifice a mere transaction. "You're saving my career, Laura. I won't forget this," he had said, but the warmth I had once felt for him was gone, replaced by a hollow emptiness. The surgery itself was a success, at least for Ethan. He recovered quickly, buoyed by the prospect of returning to his life, his career. I, on the other hand, faced complications. The physical pain was nothing compared to the realization that Ethan viewed my suffering as a necessary inconvenience, a stepping stone on his path to recovery. During one of his rare visits to my hospital room, Ethan's true feelings became painfully clear. "You know, this really puts things into perspective. I need to focus on my recovery, on getting back to work. We'll talk about us later," he had said, avoiding my gaze. "Us? What's there to talk about?" "You've made your priorities clear, Ethan," I retorted, the bitterness in my voice surprising even me. Ethan had merely shrugged, the gesture dismissive. "Laura, you knew what you were getting into when you married me. My career has always been my priority. You agreed to support me, remember?" That conversation was a turning point for me. It crystallized the stark reality of our marriage. To Ethan, I was nothing more than a means to an end, a convenient solution to his problems. My well-being, my dreams, my sacrifices were irrelevant to him. As Ethan left the room, his footsteps echoing hollowly in the sterile corridor, a resolve hardened within me. I would no longer be the silent, suffering wife. Ethan had taken everything from me, my love, my liver, and now he sought to discard me when I was no longer of use to him. But I would not let him. I would fight back, not just for myself, but for every moment of neglect, every dismissive word, every sacrifice made in vain. Ethan Barnes would learn that my generosity came with a price, one that he would pay dearly. In the sterile ambience of Ethan's lawyer's office, I found myself sitting across from the man I once vowed to spend my life with. Ethan's demeanor was a mixture of impatience and arrogance, a stark contrast to the gravity of our meeting. Without any preamble, he pushed a set of documents toward me. "Let's get this over with," Ethan said, barely hiding his disdain. "I've offered you a fair settlement. Everything is in order." I scanned the documents, my heart sinking with each word. "Fair?" I echoed, disbelief coloring my tone. "You think abandoning your wife after she saved your life is fair?" Ethan smirked, a cold glint in his eyes. "I'm just being realistic, Laura. Our marriage was over long before this. It's better for both of us to move on." The lawyer shifted uncomfortably, sensing the tension, but Ethan waved him off, his focus solely on me. "Look, Laura, I'm starting a new chapter in my life. I suggest you do the same. Take the settlement. It's more than generous given the circumstances." His words stung, a brutal reminder of the transactional nature of what our marriage had devolved into. "A new chapter? At my expense?" I retorted, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "You owe me for every sacrifice, every ignored plea for attention, every moment of pain." Ethan laughed, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. "You're delusional if you think you're entitled to anything more. I made you who you are. Without me, you're nothing." That was the last straw. The pain and humiliation I had endured crystallized into a fierce resolve. "We'll see about that, Ethan. You may think you've won, but this is far from over. I'll make sure of it." As I left the office, Ethan's facade of confidence seemed to crack, revealing a flicker of doubt. The battle lines were drawn, and I was no longer the woman he thought he could easily discard. The days that followed were a blur of strategizing and planning. Mark, a colleague and friend, became my ally in the quest for justice. Over coffee one afternoon, I shared the full extent of Ethan's betrayal, my words painting a vivid picture of the man behind the public persona. "He can't get away with this, Laura," Mark said, his anger mirroring my own. "You deserve better. We need to expose him for who he truly is." "I agree," I replied, the weight of my decision heavy on my shoulders. "It's time for some well-deserved karma." Together, we crafted a plan that was both bold and risky. Utilizing Mark's connections, we secured an interview with a prominent online platform known for its investigative journalism. The piece would detail my side of the story, laying bare Ethan's deceit and manipulation for the world to see. On the day the article was published, I felt a mix of fear and vindication. The headline alone, "The Unseen Sacrifice, a Wife's Tale of Betrayal and Bravery," was a testament to the journey I had embarked upon. Ethan's reaction was swift and predictable. His fury came through the phone line, palpable and venomous. "How dare you do this to me, Laura? You'll pay for this." "It's only the truth, Ethan," I responded, my voice calm but firm. "Something you've been running from for far too long." "You think you can destroy me?" "I'll sue you for defamation," he threatened, his voice a blend of anger and desperation. "Go ahead and try," I countered, a sense of empowerment coursing through me. "Everything in that article is the truth, and I have the evidence to prove it. It's your word against mine, and the court of public opinion has already made its verdict." The call ended with Ethan slamming the phone down, but I remained unfazed. I had taken the first step in reclaiming my life and dignity, no longer a silent victim of Ethan's cruelty. As the fallout from the article began to unfold, with Ethan's public image and career taking a hit, I watched from a distance. There was no joy in my heart, only a solemn satisfaction that justice was finally being served. I had started this fight to expose the truth, not for revenge, but to reclaim my voice that Ethan had tried so hard to silence. Now, standing on the precipice of a new beginning, I knew the hardest battles were still ahead. But for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to face them head-on. The aftermath of the article's publication was like watching a slow-motion collapse of Ethan's carefully constructed world. My phone buzzed continuously with notifications, texts from old friends, colleagues, and even strangers expressing their support and sharing their own stories of disillusionment and betrayal. It was overwhelming, yet validating. Ethan, on the other hand, found himself in the eye of a storm he could no longer control. The first crack in Ethan's armor appeared publicly when a video of him confronting a journalist went viral. His anger, usually so well masked by charm and wit, was on full display for the world to see. "Why don't you tell the real story about how Laura is trying to ruin my life?" Ethan spat at the journalist, who merely replied, "We're just interested in the truth, Mr. Barnes." The truth. A concept so foreign to Ethan, it seemed to enrage him further. His tirade continued, unaware of the cameras recording every word, every gesture of disdain. This was not the Ethan the public knew and admired. This was the man I had lived with, fought with, and ultimately left. As Ethan's public persona unraveled, I received a call from Mark, his voice tinged with excitement and anticipation. "Have you seen the latest? Ethan's self-destructing. Your story has opened the floodgates. People are coming forward with their own experiences." I hadn't anticipated the breadth of the impact. I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's more than I expected. I just wanted to share my story, not this." Mark was quick to reassure me. "Laura, you did the right thing. Ethan's true colors needed to be exposed. The world needed to see him for who he really is." As Ethan's life spiraled, his attempts to regain control became more desperate and pathetic. Sponsors withdrew their support. His social media became a battleground, and his professional engagements dried up. The man who once held the power to sway public opinion was now a pariah, his words dissected and discredited. The culmination of Ethan's downfall came one evening when I saw him pleading his case on a low-rated talk show, a far cry from the influential platforms he once frequented. "I've been misrepresented," Ethan claimed, his voice lacking its usual conviction. "This is a coordinated attack on my character." But the host was unsympathetic. "The evidence suggests otherwise, Mr. Barnes. Your actions, your words, have led us here. It seems you are your own worst enemy." Watching Ethan flounder, I felt a complex mix of emotions. There was no satisfaction in seeing him destroyed, no joy in his suffering. What I felt was a somber recognition of the inevitable conclusion to a story that had started the moment Ethan chose his ambition over our marriage, his ego over our partnership. The chapter closes not with a celebration of victory, but with a quiet contemplation of the cost of truth. Ethan's downfall was a public spectacle, but for me, it was a deeply personal closure to a chapter of my life that had brought me to the brink. I turned off the TV and looked around my quiet apartment, the noise of Ethan's downfall fading into the background. It was time to move forward, to rebuild not just my life, but my sense of self. Ethan's legacy would be one of caution and regret, but mine was still unwritten. And with each passing day, I was finding the strength to write a new chapter, one defined by resilience, dignity, and an unyielding pursuit of truth. Ethan's downfall from grace wasn't just a spectacle. It became a cautionary tale whispered within the corridors of power and across social media platforms. His attempts to salvage his reputation only dug his grave deeper, each denial and accusation against me serving to alienate him further from the court of public opinion. A few weeks after the tumultuous interview, Ethan reached out to me directly for the first time since the article's publication. His voice, once confident and commanding, now carried a note of desperation. "Laura, please," Ethan pleaded over the phone. "We need to talk. This has gone too far. Can't we just meet and sort this out?" His words, meant to sway, only served to remind me of the countless times his promises had fallen flat. "Sort this out?" I echoed, my tone incredulous. "Ethan, there's nothing left to sort. You made your choices." "But I'm losing everything," Ethan stammered, the facade of the unflappable commentator crumbling. "Can't you see? This vendetta of yours is destroying me." I paused, weighing my response. "This isn't a vendetta, Ethan. It's accountability, something you've avoided for far too long." Ethan's reply was a mix of anger and pleading. "I'll make it right, Laura. Just help me stop this madness." "Stop it," I replied, a resolve strengthening within me. "Ethan, the only madness was thinking you could treat people the way you did without consequence. You're on your own." The call ended with a click, and I was left with the silence of my apartment, a stark contrast to the turmoil Ethan was facing. His empire, built on charisma and manipulation, was now just ruins, his legacy tarnished by his own actions. The weeks that followed saw Ethan's public appearances dwindle to nothing. The few platforms that once vied for his insights now shunned him, his name becoming synonymous with betrayal and deceit. Even his social media, once a battleground of support and condemnation, went silent, as if the world had moved on, leaving Ethan Barnes a mere footnote in a relentless news cycle. But the true extent of Ethan's downfall was brought home to me one evening when Mark called, his voice somber. "Have you heard? Ethan's been let go from his consultancy. Apparently, the firm wants to distance themselves from any controversy." I hadn't heard, and the news left me with a complex knot of emotions. Ethan had built his career on being the voice of reason, the insightful commentator who could unravel complex political landscapes with ease. Now he was voiceless, his fall from grace complete. "It's a shame," I found myself saying, not just for Ethan, but for all that had been lost along the way. "He had potential, Mark. He just lost sight of what was important." Mark agreed, the conversation drifting to other topics, but my thoughts remained on Ethan. In his relentless pursuit of success, he had sacrificed everything, including those who cared for him. His downfall was not just a failure of character, but a warning of the price of ambition unchecked by empathy or responsibility. As I hung up the phone, the finality of Ethan's situation settled over me. There was no joy in his loss, no sense of victory in his defeat. Instead, there was a quiet acknowledgement of the inevitable outcome of a life lived at the expense of others. Turning away from the window, I realized that while Ethan's story might have ended, mine was just beginning. Freed from the shadow of his deceit, I could finally start anew, building a future on my terms, defined not by the pain of the past, but by the promise of tomorrow.